Just because you live in a townhouse or cluster home complex doesn't mean that you have to compromise on all the things that you would have in a big garden. For instance, a pool, an entertainment area, secluded little nooks, and great planting. If you want to know how, take a look. This townhouse garden, designed by Craig Denecker, is a prime example of how a homeowner's needs and a landscaper's capabilities can merge to create optimal compact living. I suppose one of the good things about townhouse complexes is generally when you come on site, there's nothing there.
Quite often there is, especially in obviously the newer developments where people haven't got anything other than lawn. Otherwise, what happens is if it's not even a townhouse, but maybe a cluster house in a residential estate, you'd normally, if it was built by a developer, would have maybe 2 or 3 trees and shrubs and then just a large area of lawn. So it's pretty much a blank slate for us, so we get to put in whatever we would like to, which is always nice. You're not really confined to too much other than the boundary wall.
And then, of course, one of the things that you have with a small garden, you need to get privacy from all the people that are surrounding you. So then you go up, and that could actually end up making the property feel even smaller.
Yes, with the possible exception of the equestrian estates, typical estate living and townhouses, the typical house that most people would live in, you end up having, if it's not 1 or 2 views, sometimes it's entire garden that gets overseen from neighbours' balconies and neighbours' windows, and that's always an issue. And rather than building taller walls and sort of using elements that are hard on the eye, by using big shrubs or small trees or big trees, sometimes big trees don't fit into the space that's available. But all of those soft elements help to screen, and they also help with the sound. So if there's if you're on one of the main roads, trees will help to cut down that traffic, and of course a water feature, which you'll see a little bit down the line. In the swimming pool we added a water feature, so that helps create some white noise, which then makes the traffic nearby less obvious.
You know, one of the nice things about this particular garden is of walking around is that pretty much every single little bit of space has been utilized for something different, even in like those little forgotten side areas of the home.
Yeah, it's not a massive property at all. The house is very big, but the land available for landscaping isn't massive. But it's got lots of little rooms, little areas within the garden, so you can discover and explore over such a small area, which you wouldn't really think would be possible. A lot of people with this sort of size garden would tend to think that it'll be one landscaped area and that's it, when in reality we've got completely different garden this side to what's on the other side.
Were there any constraints that you were given when it came to actually designing this garden in terms of either design or in planting?
So with most estates nowadays, there are limits to or restrictions with regards to the planting. In this case, there was no restriction. We could use pretty much whatever the client wanted, so we designed around their personal style and likes and dislikes rather than a tabled list of plants, which is quite nice, because then it means you have more freedom in the design process, and your creativity doesn't really have any restrictions. However, in terms of built structures, that was a bit of red tape. So we've got a fire pit area, and that's the client actually told me now it took about a year after the time that we finished the project to actually get it finally approved and everybody happy on the homeowners association. So some estates are easier to deal with than others when it comes to building and structures in the garden. I suppose they always have to be careful that people aren't building something that can someday become a guest house. So in this case, that was the only real restriction was in terms of the hardscapes, the pergola structure that we put up. But the planting wasn't an issue. Nothing else was a problem. We could do whatever we would like to do.
So what was the brief when you arrived here? I mean, I'm looking at the plants. It's very simple planting, lots of grasses, a lot of low maintenance stuff.
They wanted it to be low maintenance. They didn't want to have something where they have to work every weekend. So this garden, as it stands now, they have a gardener that comes in once a week, one single person once a week, and that's the maintenance that they have. And you can see the condition that it's in. I would have thought would never be a one-day job once a week. It just looks, there's a lot more space, there's a lot of detail, and everything looks really, really good. So the thing is that ultimately they wanted a low maintenance garden. They wanted to have something a water feature somewhere in the garden, so we decided to integrate that into the swimming pool, because the swimming pool without a water feature is pretty much like a really big bucket of water. It just shimmers when the wind blows, yes. But it doesn't really have that movement and that sound that a water feature has. So they also wanted to have a living space with a fire pit area, so we designed a fire pit area with a pergola overhead. We used a low maintenance wood, so they don't have to treat it on a regular basis with like you would with normal wood. We also on one of the walls next to the fire pit area, they've got a movie screen. It's a cool idea because if you do want to enjoy outdoor weather in summertime, you have brilliantly warm evenings. It gives you something else that you can do in spending time in the garden rather than sitting inside. It's just something a little bit different.
Yeah. Now the problem is sometimes that people come and they've got the garden and they want to have all the hard landscaping things, and then they don't really think about the plants. And the plants are the thing that you need to have softening the entire area. So of course, low maintenance, immediately the mind goes to succulents. I see that there's lots of succulents, but in the middle of winter, that garden is looking fantastic with the amount of colour and the fullness of it, which is actually a bonus. So I mean, the people are always saying, I don't want a garden that's just full of succulents, but that really does change your mind about it.
Yeah, I always used to think that a tropical garden would be my favourite type of garden. And then I did a design for a client a few years ago where I was trying to show them what a typical tropical garden would look like and a succulent garden. And when I was looking up all the different types of images that would show you pretty much what those styles would look like, the succulent gardens were of the most colourful, the most interesting, because there's so many different textures that come through, and I never would have really realised it as clearly as I did when I was comparing the different types of images. So you can have an amazing looking garden with succulents, and it's very low maintenance, doesn't use a lot of water, so there are a lot of benefits to having that. I still like my palm trees though. They also don't use much water, but they create a different environment. I suppose something that you like or you don't like, but yeah, for me, I enjoy palm trees.
But that is the thing, screening is one of the things that people come in and ask about most often. What small trees are there? And I always say to them, don't use a tree if you're in a small property, rather use a large shrub.
People don't realize that the definition of a tree is a big thing by definition. It's not even a small tree it becomes large, and a lot of trees, even though they don't necessarily have invasive root systems, they still require space to grow. And a lot of the properties, the size of the garden between the paving, the boundary wall and the house doesn't leave a whole lot of room for the trees to grow. So a large shrub works very well. Fralinias and Durantas, there are quite a few options that one has to screen without using something that's going to become a monstrous plant in a few years.
I think putting up something that the jasmine can grow completely wild, some Maria exotica in the shady areas, some of those wonderful Machiabellas.
Yeah, Machiabellas work very well.
I mean, those are what you need. So I think that the lesson that people could learn from this is, I mean, just looking at how amazingly these archers are working with the Duranta, is if you want to do screening, don't go for trees. Although I did notice there is a leopard tree.
Yes, there is one leopard tree. They like the idea of a leopard tree because of that sort of canopy that it makes. So that was a request.
Do they know how big leopard trees get?
They become very big, but they can be used quite close to walls. We've had massive ones at clients that are. We're actually one of the places that comes to mind had about 6 of them within a metre of the wall of a double-story building, and they must have been there for over 20 years, and no damage. Even the paving hadn't lifted. Had no lifting. The biggest problem with them though is when they become much bigger, they drop seed pods, and that becomes a bit of a mission to clean up. The little leaves, if they drop in the pool, get sucked up quite easily, but those seed pods are more of a problem. But they're beautiful trees.
They are exquisite trees. Definitely, and we'll get a nice canopy over the top, once again giving you that screening.
Kind of a shade and some screening, yeah.